Morning, everybody. Thanks for joining us to our Orkestra's first webinar for 2025. Very exciting. We've got people joining us from New Zealand. We've got people joining us from across Australia. So really appreciate you coming along to this. Just while people are still coming in. So today we're going to be exploring C&I solar and battery opportunities in New Zealand. It's a big title and a bit of a mouthful. I wish I didn't make it so big now. But we got very special guests with us today. So we're joined by Ecotricity from New Zealand, who we've been working with very, very closely over the last 6 months. And we see them as very innovative leaders in the NZ market. So we've invited them along today as guest speakers who are going to present a lot of the things they've been learning in the NZ market. And we're going to work with them very, very closely today in showing you and unpacking sort of all those opportunities for New Zealand. So quickly, I'll just run through an agenda. So my name's Tyler Jackman. I'm the head of sales here at Orkestra. I'm going to do some introductions at the beginning, and then you're not going to hear too much from me at the start. I'm going to hand over to Ecotricity, who's going to give you a bit of background on who Ecotricity are, for those of you that don't know them, and then just like a high-level market overview. So what's happening in the New Zealand market? What are we seeing with energy prices? And then obviously all those opportunities that are popping up through there. And then also just talking about some of the challenges. So what challenges do we face with trying to stand up C&I or commercial industrial solar systems, or, batteries are definitely trending pretty hard at the moment. A lot of the conversations we've had with New Zealand customers is they're looking to try and integrate batteries. And then we've got the 144 tariffs as well, which is very unique to New Zealand. We don't have anything like that here in Australia. So just talking about those and the Ecotricity offering around that. And then after the presentation, we've got our own Jake Reesby from Orkestra. He's going to be showing a bit of a demonstration in the platform in Orkestra, just to show you what it looks like to set some projects up in there and getting some sort of results out of it. And then lastly, at the end, we should have time for some questions. So everyone can see a Q&A down at the bottom in their chat. So as the webinar is going, if you've got questions that pop up, please type them in there. We're just going to be tracking along with them throughout the webinar. We may be able to answer them on the fly if it comes up and it's in theme with what we're talking about. If not, don't worry, we'll get to them at the end and we'll start to answer all those questions. If we can't get to all of them, don't worry, we'll send out some answers after the webinar. So just like to introduce everybody. So first of all, we've got Lewis Porto, who is our solar group manager at Ecotricity, who's going to be presenting today to all of you. And then we've got Jason Christine Crawford, who is our smart grid program manager at Ecotricity. Jason's going to be joining us today, especially to answer some questions at the end, or help us answer questions at the end. And then we've got Orkestra's Jake Reesby, who's our lead account executive. If there's any of you that are existing customers in New Zealand, you definitely know Jake. Jake is in charge of our Australian New Zealand customers. So he's going to be demoing the Orkestra show at the end, and we'll also be here to answer some questions. So thanks for all of you that are joining that are Orkestra customers already and know who we are. For those of you that don't, so Orkestra, we provide software that empowers businesses to make smarter energy decisions. So we are tailored for the commercial industrial sector. We run feasibility modeling. So all those super complex energy models that people have been running in spreadsheets, we make that as quick and fast and easy as possible for especially sales teams, business development teams, and engineering teams to be able to run feasibility reports and turn these really complex energy potential solutions into nice reports that you can share with customers. So we do offer a 21-day free trial. So if you haven't used Orkestra before, jump on our website, sign up. Jake will be in there to help you assist and set up your first couple of projects in there. But yeah, please get in touch with us after the webinar, and we'll be able to give you some more information on there. So I think that's pretty much it from me for now. I'm actually going to hand over to Ecotricity. to Lewis, who's going to be presenting, I guess, all that market overview and background on Ecotricity and a lot about these local opportunities in New Zealand. Lewis, welcome, and over to you. I'll stop sharing my screen as well so you can share yours.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Tyler. Kia ora koutou, everyone. Good to be here. Let's get going. All right. So, yeah, as Tyler alluded to, we're going to talk a little bit about C&I market opportunities today. There's a little bit of an intro on Ecotricity. We're going to jump into some market stats and some of the mechanisms that we are using to kind of support those endeavors. Yeah, certainly very, very exciting times. So first of all, who's Ecotricity? We are energy retailer in New Zealand. We supply energy from renewable sources. We only buy from renewable sources. So we get wind power, hydropower, naturally solar power, and support EV uptake. So some of you guys probably saw Gavin's video. He's our kind of guru in the EV space. We see this definitely as an entry point for the solar journey. So within the solar space, more specifically, we are buying energy from solar farms, supporting a few sites, definitely commercial and residential customers getting that excess solar export. So as of today, we have roughly 30 times the national average in terms of solar penetration. It's early days. There's a lot to do still. But yeah, very exciting journey ahead. So some numbers, just some stats. I mean, we've been doing solar for a while now. It's been a good few years, some successful partnerships in the past and still going. So roughly 70% of our residential and SME customers have solar. Out of those, 83% got batteries. We're massively or support of batteries uptake for that kind of peak time and peak demand shaving. We are a leading energy retailer for solar customers. We have 130 plus partners New Zealand wide. So those EPC partners, designers, consultants, etc. Everyone that can kind of bring you to the journey. We're agnostic in terms of hardware and these type of things. We see our role fitting as supporting these systems to go live. As I said, we have 30% solar penetration in the market average. And when it comes to the battery space, there's around 100 megawatt hours of batteries. They're linked up with us in terms of ICPs. And we also have a VPP flexibility program that Jason's managed. And so something that we've invested for a while now, and we definitely see a bright future ahead. The Ecotricity funnel is quite spread. We're really well known, I would say, in the corporate space with commercial clients. Certainly people that have a commitment towards sustainability, their carbon emissions. We do measure our carbon emissions as well. We've probably seen the Toitū Envirocare logos floating everything that relates to us. So we measure all of our emissions, offset those or the remaining emissions, and leave a positive impact on the world. That's what we're here for. So there's a little bit of a market check to kind of like set the scene. There's some stuff that's probably not news to some of you guys, where some others, might be some exciting stats. So the RMI report that came through roughly a year ago into kind of the renewables uptake world, so globally speaking, see a massive drop in terms of cost per megawatt hour across some key renewables that we need to deploy over the coming years. So wind, solar, and battery costs drop anywhere between 70 to nearly 80% in the last 10 years. I think there's still a remaining effect of people thinking they are way too expensive, but we can see now the cost per watt dropping quite dramatically and making them competitive with the fossil fuel alternatives. So that's all very exciting. In the grand scheme of things, when it comes to electricity generation, so the useful energy cost per megawatt hour, we see solar, wind, and batteries being quite competitive with the fossil fuel alternatives. Bear in mind, the data, it's a little bit outdated if you think about it. There's probably, some further data that needs to come up in the next couple of years. So there's a massive gain of efficiencies when it comes to what they call it clean tech alternatives, right? Whereas, commodities like fossil fuels alternatives don't experience that as such, right? So it is a time for solar, it is a time for wind and batteries. And we can see that in terms of outperforming forecasts. So when we look at, new solar additions, EV shares of sales and battery sales, all the actual curve, it's outperforming the forecasts for the last few years. So we're going through what, we name it as a S-curve trend. So it's rapidly speeding up. And we see this on a day-to-day with a lot of partners coming through and inquiring about commercial installations and these type of things, where previously was mainly like resi focus in the New Zealand market. And the same thing applies for the likes of solar farms, etc. So all those things go kind of hand in hand. We see EVs as massive potential in terms of battery storage and further deployment to the grid at peak times. Naturally, batteries are doing the same kind of role. And yeah, a lot to come in this space. When it comes to the New Zealand market specifically, we can see that in the same 10 years, a 24 times growth. So it's just absolutely massive. We're still say like just touching on the surface in terms of the full potential, but we're getting there, and yeah, exciting times ahead. That's across all types of ICPs. We're soon going to jump into some more CNI specific scenarios. So what we see the solar opportunities with CNI customers. So when we look at the resi uptake in New Zealand, that's the total combination in terms of generation. And by the way, all that information is public, available at the Electricity Authority website. There's roughly 63,000 ICPs in the market, and the system size is roughly around 5 kilowatts. Quite remarkable what was achieved over the last few years. The SME space are just on the verge of 69 megawatts and trending upwards. Same thing applies to commercial landscape, around 63 megawatts. But I think the most impressively one is the industrial uptake. So we have around 194 megawatts of solar deployed in the CNI space. And we can see a massive jump over literally the last 12 months. So I think there's quite a bit of opportunity to tap into those industrial manufacturing scenarios. So at a combined level, with probably a shorter span of time in terms of the actual deployment and uptake of solar in the commercial setup, we already have the total megawatts deployed larger than the resi space accumulated over all these years. Around 8,000 ICPs deployed within a commercial, industrial, and SME scenario, and around 38 kilowatts per ICP. Naturally, that varies quite dramatically. We're going to see some scenarios later on at the demonstration, which can go all the way up to the hundreds. We've seen systems up to 2 or 3 megawatts on a rooftop, which is quite exciting. The industry is definitely building momentum. The Electricity Authority released a recent update on the energy competition task force, and they find some potentials. As we know, some of you guys have been operating in this for a while. It's what has been needed for a long time, which is essentially that network support for peak export. So there's 3 proposals. We're kind of summarizing a couple of points. So retail offering TOU pricing for import and export, and that's something that we already do. And networks to pay consumers for peak export. So We support that. We pass on network charges at cost, and naturally the same applies with rebates. Some of you guys probably came across a flexi project that we had in Lincoln, and that kind of reverted into really interesting buyback rates at peak time. There are a couple of alternatives when it comes to generation. As we all know, there's on-site generation. There's some clear benefits when it comes to that. So briefly touch on these. First of all is the self-consumption. That's the traditional setup of solar, where you're deploying locally first, and there's any excess energy, you might push it out to the grid. The key benefit here is that you avoid some of the network charges. When we see the electricity authority potentially implement this in the future, that picture might change a little bit. But the scenario is that you have an improved ROI, because the energy, the total energy cost is essentially the retail rate plus the network charges. So if you can avoid the network charges, you definitely have a better payback. We're seeing some scenarios across exported only sites. So essentially, in other words, have a mini solar farm on your roof. We know, depending on the contractual setup in terms of own versus lease properties, it can be a bit difficult. So trying to push the dial with those guys in a situation where you implement the solar first, push it out to the grid. We're more than happy to buy that energy. And at a later date, if you have a tenant there that want to perhaps revert back, that's totally fine. We can look at those scenarios. There's other combinations around kind of sleeving. So you might be as a net generator in some sites and have some consumption at a different ICP at a different location. We can aggregate this at a group level and certainly provide some of the benefits as we kind of balance it out, all the energy. So the rooftop levelized cost of energy we're seeing is around 7 to 9 cents, and that's spread out the 25 to 30 years lifespan of the asset and installation. Naturally, that will be generating much longer than that, but often when we model it out is around 25 to 30 years. So that's what we're seeing is pretty affordable. Some of the considerations, as I said, is around the property status, lease versus owned properties. Happy to work with both stakeholders in that sense. The building energy density, so there's some examples around, if you have a warehouse just for storage, so very low energy use, but quite a large roof space there. So you're probably in a position to be a net generator, where in other instance, you might have very high density building, like a cold store, where the majority of the energy really be deployed locally. Just something to consider when you're looking at a kilowatt hour per square meter. And what we want to support in the general sense is how we get customers to max out the solar and the return. So if you've got a roof that potentially, 100 kilowatt system would cater for their load, how we get that roof to then go perhaps to a 1 megawatt, 2 megawatt or larger system. One thing to consider also is the future proofing of it. So battery storage, future demand, as you electrify further processes and more electrification opportunities as you have excessive power available. So for offsite generation, which is the other alternative, it's perfect for high consumption corporates and government entities. So it's around that kind of ratio that we're talking of build density versus the area available. So, how much energy you actually need throughout the year. Looking at sleeving opportunities with some offsite generation, which then experience lower rates for longer term contracts. So it's essentially a trade-off of the typical 3-year contracts into longer contracts. Ground mount levelized cost of energy around the 5 to 7 cents a kilowatt hour, which is pretty attractive because naturally you can deploy at a larger scale. There's some economies of scale over there. Some of the things to consider definitely enhance the resilience as you have more systems spread out across the country. You're less subject to the likes of shading or not, the perfect weather for generation. You definitely have improved energy rates in terms of network charges, not as much because the consumption is still ICP is still going to incur some of those network charges. But then you are competing in terms of single versus multiple projects, bigger area, you have more megawatts deployed, therefore more megawatt hours available. In terms of price plans, these are some of the alternatives that we put forward to CNI customers and solar farms. You have the standard exposure to spot, what we call the eco wholesale. Spot at the moment is looking pretty good. You know, it's not bad to be on spot at the moment. Last December wasn't the same. You know, the prices were quite low. So you know, it's definitely a market that's really volatile as we've been experiencing the last couple of years. You know, however, there's quite a bit of renewables in the pipeline, so we expect this will definitely change in the coming years and months. Quite I suppose a famous alternative is the Export 144 when we're looking at a slightly longer term contract between 5 to 10 years, where you can be perhaps a net generator. If you are in a position to be a net generator on an annual basis, we're more than happy to offer 10-year PPA, which makes very easy, or easier at least, for bank financing. That's definitely something that we put forward based on the feedback we received from banks and customers alike. So the 144 tariff that we offer to customers, that's based on the spot forecast, but without the spot risk. So in a way, you're going to have the shape where seasonality comes into play. You have a higher payback for winter, a lower payback for summer. You know, we all know that generation is short in winter times. So we need to kind of increase our generation capacity to cater for those winter months. So as I said, any site pretty much can be a solar farm. You can just push it out to the grid, and we're happy to buy that, being a rooftop or ground mount. The fixed rates will give you guaranteed revenue, so they vary throughout the year, and there's 144 rates, and I know it's not the easiest thing to kind of wrap the head around it, you know, but it kind of gives that element of that dynamic of seasonality, and still provides a guaranteed revenue. One new offering they'll be working on in the background and kind of became available very recently is actually the combination of both options. It's what we call a Export 144 plus spot. So those would be in a scenario where you can do a split volume across different price schedules. So as an example, you could decide to fix 80% of that volume, generation volume, on a 144 tariff and 20% variable on spot. That's for every half hour. That's not like kind of pick and choose, but the breakdown that's up to the customer or generator in the sense. The feedback we receive is that definitely helps with sharing kind of some of those opportunities and reducing the risk, you know, so you're not fully exposed to spot, neither you're fully locked into a 144. That will happen for every half hour. And the other feedback we receive, it helps you build a business case for batteries systems. We know in a larger setup like CNI and solar farms, you know, in some instances not economic viable yet. And yeah, based on that feedback, essentially, we developed the solution of 144 plus spot. The spot will give you a higher rate at peak times, most of the days and seasons. So hopefully that swing and that breakdown in terms of the percentage should be enough to kind of justify some of those battery systems. There are a lot of variables. There's definitely a lot of variables. There's different sizes, there's different roof space, there's you know, different setups that can be applied. So something like Orkestra is absolutely crucial for us to kind of plot those systems and model it out and make sure the business case works. You know, we know a lot of guys working the feasibility side of things until, you know, and take some time for those projects to kind of go forward. So Orkestra really unlocks that opportunity of looking at a range of scenarios, a range of kind of paybacks, different interest rates. Honestly, we are a massive fan of the tool, and definitely been supporting. We're kind of, make it more, I suppose, digestible for people that are not as involved in the electricity and retail space, because essentially you're breaking down into numbers, into financial terms, etc., and people understand dollar figures, right? So, I mean, I'd say if you are interested, definitely get in touch. Ecotricity is more than happy to help in a lot of these scenarios, everything to do with solar. If it's not with us, we're more than happy to put in touch with the right people. Definitely the likes of Orkestra help building the business case for it. So yeah, that's what we want to do and what we want to support moving forward. There's a couple of touch points. I'll be happy to share the slides afterwards. But yeah, we looking forward to hearing from you guys and see you on the other side with those systems being deployed.
Excellent. Thanks for that, Lewis. That was a fantastic presentation and really insightful, I guess, the high level overview of what's happening in the market, especially around pricing, especially around the S curves of the technology and deployment of solar and batteries. And that, I think, that's our goal. That's our mission at Orkestra, is to be able to help businesses unlock more of these technologies and be able to deploy them quicker. And I know that Ecotricity, and especially with your sort of innovation around 144s, 10-year, up to 10-year 144 tariffs that you can offer, but also doing that split as well. So looking at, okay, how do we develop a tariff that actually makes it more attractive to be able to deploy more batteries? And it all comes back to feasibility, right? It all comes back to how do these batteries stack up and stand up from a business perspective. So I'm just going to go back to share my slides. So in here, like we've just discussed, like 144 is very unique to New Zealand. When Orkestra started looking in New Zealand last year, we heard about this 144, and it was one of the difficulties we had to build into our software to be able to digest not just a 1-year rates card, but also now open that up to a 10-year rates card as well. So I think it's one of the most difficult things that we've had to do for localizing for the New Zealand market, but absolutely one of the biggest benefits, because what that allows you to do is take a rates card, drop that file into Orkestra, and it will upload. And then rather than modeling everything off averages, annual averages or monthly averages, you can actually model that each 4-hour interval throughout the year and then over the 10 years. So that's definitely one area that we're getting a lot of good feedback from our New Zealand customers, being able to model those complex tariffs in Orkestra and deliver results that are really aligned with what's actually going to happen. So the other thing as well is last year Orkestra we ran a 4-part series. So if any of you out there are interested, we've got a webinar series which is all around successfully selling C&I solar and batteries. So it's a 4-part series because we've broken it down into, it's not just about the technologies that you're selling and the feasibility study that you produce at the end, but it's also about how to propose and pitch these projects to boards, financial decision makers, CFOs, because as a lot of companies are, I guess, trying to elevate up out of the residential market into commercial, we understand that the way that you sell these systems changes. So if anyone's interested, we'll obviously share all these slides afterwards, and you'll have access to have a look at that webinar series, where you can actually, we really break down the conversations and the process to really unlock these sales in the commercial and industrial space and try and get these projects to stand up. So without any further ado, I'm going to introduce Jake Reesby here. He's going to take over and share. And what we're going to do is look at demonstrating these in the Orkestra platform. So we're going to have a look at some projects that Jake's already set up in here. I think they're probably a good representation of a standard commercial industrial site in New Zealand, and actually show you what that looks like to walk through. So I'm just going to stop sharing my screen, and I'm going to hand over to Jake, and we're going to see some projects in Orkestra For those of you that haven't been into Orkestra before, the first time, we'll see that Jake's going to give a bit of an overview of how everything looks. He's not going to build anything today from scratch. It's already set up, but just show you what it looks like and what those sort of results look like in here. Jake, over to you, mate.
G'day guys, thanks for having me. Just double checking that everyone can see my screen.
Yeah,
you guys can see that.
Good.
Cool. So for those of you who have met me, it's really nice to meet the rest of you. But we've been working quite closely with Ecotricity over the last couple of months, and been deployed into New Zealand probably for about 18 months, and we've had quite a lot of success. So just on top of everything that's been covered so far, I thought I'd just run through a couple of pretty common projects that I'm coming across New Zealand. As I've said, I think about 2 months ago, we had some really, really good success with one of the largest rooftop installations being sold on a greenfields warehouse with the Tariff 144 export. So some of the really common projects that we're coming across, and where Orkestra's main goal is obviously in Australia, where we started off, was to deploy more solar and storage. And now that we've migrated into New Zealand, the goal is exactly the same, where we're trying to make it as easy as possible to model accurately, find and discover different opportunities by understanding the network Tariff 144. So for starters, what I will show is with the Tariff 144, both a 10-year, 5-year, 3-year, 1 year, we can simply just copy and paste the entire 10-year spread that Ecotricity sends out straight into Orkestra. You'll find that no longer do we need to do averages across the year. You'll find that every single month is filled out each 4-hour spread. And then when it comes to a 10-year spread, that essentially falls to 1,440 tariffs. And so James, one of our co-founders, has actually built a spreadsheet that you can just drop all the numbers in and simply just upload it. And so here's how some of those projects look. So the first project I've run is an Auckland warehouse and manufacturing. As you can see, we have about 50 to 60 network tariffs already built into the tool for New Zealand. Here in Australia, this is a significant area which helps make different projects stack up, and especially with storage. We find that behind the meter, the network tariffs have the biggest influence on whether storage is feasible. So what Orkestra allows us to do, instead of testing one system at a time, I can test up to 250 systems at once. And in the same study, I can include 21 solar systems ranging from 100 to 600 kilowatts. And the same thing with storage. And what Orkestra will do, it'll test every solar system against every battery. But then in the same study, I can leave the solar systems by themselves. One of the huge benefits of doing that is, depending on the driving factor that we're looking for the customer, it will reorder all of these systems based on that particular driving factor, whether it's energy independence, net present value, payback period, and things like that as well. So for this warehouse, we have modeled both Tariff 144 for import and export. It's telling me that the net present value, the best system, is a 600 kilowatt PV system. But really cool, we actually find that batteries do stack up. Now, they're not quite as good dollars in versus dollars out with solar, but we can still get quite a lot of benefit. Okay. Now, as I mentioned earlier, we've uploaded about 50 to 60 of the network tariffs here in New Zealand. So you no longer need to focus on that and ensure that all of your staff are up to speed with all of the different nodes and things like that. As we model each system, of all 250 systems, we get the full spread. This is a shareable link that we can brand ourselves and send directly to the customer. Within these 250 studies, the customer can go through, have a look at how the system's operating, what benefits are being provided to the site, cash flow, emissions, as you might have seen before. We've got where all the different revenues coming from, backup power and things like that, all the energy metrics. Now, as we keep going, we also have a financial business model builder tool as well. This allows us to build solar PPAs. It allows us to do leases as well. And here on this other project, you'll actually see whether this is a manufacturing site and they wanted to add EV chargers, we can actually add secondary loads for EV chargers. So for example, this client will be purchasing energy at 144, but then they'll actually be selling that energy at around 50 cents, okay? And so it allows us to build all these stakeholders in. And in this particular business model, and what we're seeing quite a lot of in New Zealand at the moment is, for these greenfield sites that are potentially just looking to export for the entire 10 years, we're seeing EPCs present to landlords like a worst case scenario and saying, if there's no tenants in this building, we expect an 8.5-year ROI with your solar. But if there's a tenant in this site, obviously that is going to be improved. And so I think I got a call about 3 months ago that one of our customers has just sold a megawatt rooftop system based on a 10-year export. Obviously, that was great news for us. It demonstrated that the Tariff 144 is working quite well. In addition to that, some of the projects that we've come across quite often, this was the 10-year export that I was talking about before. Again, we can just copy and paste the 1,440 rates in, and then test essentially 45 different solar systems to actually present to the client, potentially looking at, you know, IRR as a hurdle, essentially. Moving on from that, another project that I've built here, and this is another project that I'm coming across quite often, is dairy farms that need water pumps and backup, essentially, to provide water flow to the cows and things like that. And what Orkestra allows us to do, again, using Tariff 144, I can then put a value on those blackouts for the customer. We can then run the systems, we can test the solar, we can test the storage, and essentially build the solar PPA with the backup into a single lease, into a single PPA. And the thing that I'm just really enjoying at the moment is because we've seen a lot of companies who are struggling to model Tariff 144, and essentially what they're doing is just taking an average throughout the year, or just minimizing it and essentially just modeling 1 month and then just spreading that across the 12 months. What we found over here in Australia, and what we're finding in the UK as well, is being able to decipher between rates rising and lowering. It opens up new opportunity for storage in different system sizes, and it potentially just leaves revenue on the table for a lot of these EPCs, where there actually could be much greater benefits to these customers that we're kind of just not even showing. And so with this 144 that we built with Orkestra, we're just finding really, really good success and great feedback from the customers. So no longer has, here in Australia, we feel like the game has changed as well. When I used to sell solar and storage, I used to go in with 2 to 3 static PDF quotes, and I would have to go in and convince, in the first 20 minutes of the meeting, I would have to convince them that why you should trust our studies, why you should trust our company, and why you should trust my personal opinion based on why you should go for these particular systems. And the game has kind of changed. We're now basically going in front of customers and saying, this is every possible outcome on your roof. What do you want to do? And it takes the bias away from the salesman and just basically puts it onto the customer. And it allows me to model about 250 systems in probably 15 minutes. So as long as I can receive clean data from Ecotricity, and from everything that I've seen, Ecotricity is sending that data through within a day or two, we can essentially get their load profile and just model 200 to 500 systems in about 30 minutes. And the game has kind of changed. Like we're really having great success over here in Australia, and from, I think, about 20 to 25 companies in New Zealand who are starting to adopt this, it's allowed them to change their direction into the market that they're participating in. And so on top of all of these studies that we can model, and EV charging, power factor correction, tariff comparisons, and everything like that, we can essentially take these final reports to essentially a pre and post-tax IRR report that will go for the 15, 20, 25 years that you're doing. And if I'm ever presenting to a CFO, this is exactly the document that I'm chasing, okay? And so moving forward, everyone that is willing to try and wanting to try Orkestra, you're welcome to a full 3-week trial. And that's essentially my job, is to bring you guys up to speed and just train you as much as possible during those 3 weeks and allow you to model your own projects. And the whole goal of Orkestra is to go with a feasibility first approach and try and reduce the amount of engineering time you're spending prior to actually having a financial conversation with your customer. You're presenting every possible option in front of them with every possible driving factor. And so if the customer can't give you some sort of feedback based on, yes, this looks good, why should the EPC continue to do a site inspection, engineering, feasibility studies, single SLDs and things like that? And so we've essentially accelerated that first 2 to 3 weeks down to about an hour, 2 hours to actually get these financial reports out. And to me, that's the whole crux of it. And I think we've had great success over here in Australia. And we're very, very keen to break into New Zealand as well, and help Ecotricity get some deployment on some storage. Some solar and potentially storage as well. So that's it from me, guys. Moving forward, please, anyone reach out. You're welcome to ask me as many questions as you like. If you have some projects you'd like me to build with you, that's more than fine. We also do training with certain teams and things like that as well. So I look forward to seeing some teams trying to model some 144.
Fantastic. Thanks so much, Jake, for the quick demo and the run around there. As you can see, these were pre-built projects. For those of you that aren't already Orkestra customers, yeah, absolutely, feel free to start a trial, and Jake will be able to support you setting up your first projects in there. It's fantastic if you've got real projects on your desk already, because we can use those as a business case to go and have a look at how everything works and make sure that it's it's as real as possible for you to get some results out of it during that trial period. I'll just reshare my screen again. So I guess for today, I mean, we've run through a lot. We've got some good questions starting to come through, which is fantastic. And I see some of them have already been answered, but I might just sort of spend this time now. If you do have questions, please go down to the Q&A and put them in there. But I can see some coming through, especially focused for the Ecotricity team. So maybe there's a good one that came through from Isaac there that I saw, Lewis, that you answered already. But maybe do you want to just run through that one, just because there's probably a bunch of other people in the audience that have got a similar question to that and would love to hear the answer.
Yeah, no, absolutely. One thing is, so that Isaac's question was around in terms of energies leaving, is it possible to do that across different networks within the country? And he gave an example of a solar farm in Kaitaia that feeds energy to a site in Invercargill. My reply is absolutely we can do this across different networks, but as long as they are within the same island. So, as an example, the system in Kaitaia could potentially serve as a leaving option for a site in Wellington or somewhere else in the North Island, and the same thing would apply in the South Island. So that's literally the only limitation that we have today, is as long as within the same island. But that kind of unlocks the opportunity if you have a customer with multiple sites. Maybe they have an area available in a particular site of the country, and a large consumption site at another site. So yeah, more than happy to work through some of those scenarios. I think what we wanted to achieve, and as Jake pointed very well, is how do we get to move away from the minimum and the smaller systems to match the load towards the biggest system you can deploy, and that to cater only for a lot of different scenarios in terms of payback as well, but as well as future needs. So that's kind of what we are driving towards, and able to get there in some scenarios based on the feedback of a lot of partners and customers as well.
Yeah, fantastic. Excellent. I've got a couple of other ones coming through. So good one from John, just around forecasting. So this is the interesting one where Orkestra has a lot of things so a lot of templates already in our library. So we have a pretty robust library there. But the nice thing about it, and I'll hand over to Lewis or Jason to answer the second half of this, but essentially you can BYO any forecast into Orkestra. So if you're getting forecast, and I'll hand over to Ecotricity to answer the second part of this, but if you're getting a forecast from somewhere else, you can easily drop it into Orkestra and then use that to run your modeling. So that's the nice thing about the flexibility of the platform. Yes, we might have some templates in the library, but apart from that, we absolutely allow you to bring in your own forecasts, whether they're forward curves based on spot price, based on 144s, all of that sort of stuff, and put them into the platform to be able to model off that. So I'll hand over to either Lewis or Jason just to answer, like, how does Ecotricity hand out those sort of things to Ecotricity partners?
Sure. We receive forecasts every month towards the next year or so. So we have different models on a GXP level. They can, at a high level, they can also be applied at Otahuhu or Benmore for the general kind of North Island, South Island schedules. So yeah, happy. We can provide some of that as part of the feasibility study, but they can also be done based on historical figures as well. So assuming that the behavior will kind of be quite similar. Like anything to do with forecasts and spot, I think in particular, considering the last couple of years, it's a bit of a crystal ball, right? Like you never really know where things are gonna go. But yeah, I think it's you have the reward, but you also have the risk, like anything else. The way we try to kind of minimize that is towards that 144 plus spot mix. Jason, did you have anything else to kind of add, perhaps I don't know, maybe public available information?
Yeah, no, look, I think you've covered it pretty well in terms of how that information would make its way into this tool. We do have some more real-time forecasting through the wholesale market that we use for our VPP platform, but in terms of business casing and modeling different physical configurations, no, I think you've answered that pretty well, Lewis.
Excellent. Excellent. A couple more coming in. I can see another one from another John here. So I know Jake's already answered this, but Jake, do you want to just elaborate? So the question is, can Orkestra model just battery only? So potentially a site that has existing solar on, and we're just looking to see if a battery will be viable, or potentially just a battery only and having access to potentially spot prices and be able to work into those markets. So Jake, I'll hand over to you.
Yeah, that was something that was quite popular here and still is to this day as we participate with wholesale trading in FCAS here in Australia. And in certain states in Australia, it's actually better to go for no solar and just have a battery basically purchasing energy during negative spot prices. I don't think we quite have that saturation here in New Zealand, but yeah, in the same study of 250 systems, we could have 25 solar systems, 200 solar and battery systems, and then 20 to 25 battery systems by themselves, all thrown into the same pool and compare it against each other. To me, that's a really cool feature, as opposed to just doing a solar only study and then a solar battery. You basically throw everything into the same pool, and then depending on the driving factor, it'll re-rank, and often it'll come up with results that you weren't really expecting. So absolutely. There was another question about, will we have wholesale forecast data in the tool for New Zealand as well? We can potentially provide some free forecast data as well, but it's important to note that for all New Zealand customers, whether it's 144, whether it's future forecast data or just wholesale data on your node, you can upload that into your library and continue to model with that and have your battery buying and selling against those spot prices. So all of that's available. It's easy to be done. You just add it to your library and just use that as your price data set to model against.
Yeah. Excellent. Excellent. Here's another one coming from John. So I'm going to throw this one back to the Ecotricity team. Jake, maybe you see this at a first-hand perspective, but probably Ecotricity from a what's actually being deployed perspective. It's a question here just saying, like, what is the most typical business model for that combination that you're seeing of PV plus BESS? Is it exposed to spot? Is it on a 144? Is it on? I know this mixed tariff is very, very new, so I'm not sure. Do you even have any of these batteries on that new tariff at the moment for the Ecotricity guys, or is this very, very early on in the piece?
I think it's very early on in the piece. We're definitely seeing some interest there for PV plus BESS. I mean, most of sites that we talk to, they have as kind of battery ready, so happy to kind of flick that switch anytime. I think, John, I'll do the classic of kind of it depends, what is the most common one, because it really does. It depends on the system size. It depends on how much equity you get against the project. It depends if you have debt finance format and project. So what I typically see is that customers that have any debt finance associated with the project, kind of the bank doesn't really like to be fully exposed to spot. They want some level of guarantee of that revenue and payback. So definitely the 144 has been the favorite one for those scenarios. However, some clients that have full equity against the project, they're more than happy to kind of, take the lead depending where spot sits at that point in time. What does tend to happen as well is that at a point where they, perhaps spot goes down and they're not really getting the return they desire, they like to flick that to a 144 scenario. But I think the feedback we receive on the mix profile has been really good, and depending on that breakdown, and it could be anywhere from literally 10% 144 to 90% spot, all the way to the other end. It comes down to, once again, risk, debt finance, and what are you expecting out of those systems?
Yeah, I can probably touch on that very quickly as well. And a lot of the projects I've been modeling, and with the tariff 144 and the reverse 10-year export rate card, it kind of reminds me of like 2015, 2016 Australia, when we were selling and when we had high export tariffs. And it was shooting fish in a barrel, because you could basically give someone a worst case scenario. If you didn't use any of this energy, your worst case scenario is an 8.5 year ROI. And over the last kind of as of 6-7 years ago, we in commercial sector here in Australia, we got rid of export. We would basically factor in 0 cents for export because it was out of our control and we had so much saturation. And so the fact that Ecotricity are coming through and basically giving you, here's a 10-year rate card, to us Australians is wildly awesome because, as I said, we can present worst case scenarios, and something that's harmed the industry over here is presenting elevated returns, or you're going to use 80% of the production and things like that. Whereas at the companies I work for, I generally tried to pitch a worst case scenario to try and build trust. And so this has been a really cool thing that we've seen over there. So in regards to some of the results that we're seeing, generally because of these export tariffs, solar by itself is proving to be the best investment for pretty much every site. But one of the cool things that we're actually seeing is on a lot of the sites, maybe 50 to 60% of the site, batteries aren't really harming the investment. And so whilst they don't improve it, they don't necessarily harm the investment. And so it gives another opportunity to the client saying, look, the battery isn't necessarily costing you money. Is there another reason to have a battery? Do you have security cameras, lighting and things? Does production stop if there's a blackout? And whilst the financial revenue, it's just really handy to be able to model batteries as the prices, plummeted. Over here in Australia, over the last 6 quarters, we've seen storage double every single quarter for the last 6 quarters. Okay, and so whilst batteries aren't really the most optimal thing for New Zealanders at the moment with this export tariff, it's really interesting for the customer to show them where that breaks even. And it might not be this year, but it might be 2 years from now where the batteries really start to stack up for the clients as well. So it's just really nice having that kind of transparency across the years, as opposed to, as I said earlier, just taking averages and kind of simplifying that report. So we are seeing solar, but storage is starting to stack up in New Zealand as well, which is really cool.
Yeah, excellent. A couple more questions here. So good one from Gerard. So just to comment on basically how Orkestra does its solar generation forecasting. So we've got a PV Watt plugin. So that'll take, it's P50 data that it's taking there. It's based on the closest weather station. It's building a solar generation profile. It has a little bit of flexibility around, whether it's ground mounted, whether it's single axis tracking panels, or whether it's just, roof mounted. If you want to go to more granular detail, if you've got a solar design in a helioscope or a PV system, one of those other platforms, you can actually download that generation profile, which might be 3 different orientations of panels, and there might be shading and that next level. You can actually, once again, BYO, you can upload that into Orkestra and then do your solar modeling based on that as well. So I hope that answers that question. We've got another one in here about Orkestra costs on subscription. So we have a few different packages we offer. It really depends on the features that you're looking for and that you need and the terms of that subscription. For anyone that's an Ecotricity partner, so if you're an EPC that's partnered with Ecotricity, we are moving forward offering a 10% discount on all of our subscription packages as well. But the easiest way to go and just sign up to a trial, you can go into our platform and it will have all the different packages available there. You can have a look at the pricing, whether it's month-to-month subscription, annual subscription, or, Jake and I can look at putting together sort of a bespoke subscription package that suits your needs. So yeah, come and have a chat with us and we can have a look at pricing. Another good one from Isaac. So just this one goes back to the Ecotricity team. So talking about frequency control ancillary services market and how that's developing in NZ, and I guess for Ecotricity, where do you see that moving forward? Is that something you've got your eye on? What are the opportunities around that?
Yeah, look, it's a good question, and I'm happy to take this one. So look, there is obviously a market for ancillary services in New Zealand, whether it's instantaneous reserves, FIRS and SIRS, or the frequency keeping piece. Look, in terms of how we look at it, we think the value in ancillary services in New Zealand will probably decrease over time. It's not huge at the moment, and as smarter technology enters the market, I'm thinking particularly of electric vehicles who have quite a lot of active monitoring built into them that will help stabilize local networks, help stabilize the grid ultimately. We think probably the market for ancillary services, we believe it'll probably decrease over time. What that means for us is that when we're looking at how do we find value in flexibility services moving forward, that's not something that we take to the bank, if that makes sense. If there is a bit of marginal value, great, but that's not our primary driver.
it's the cream on top, right? These batteries need to be able to stack up without those sort of high risk markets as well. But
Yeah,
good
that's
to
right.
see.
And I think there's a bit more value in the Aussie market compared to New Zealand in that space, is my understanding. But yeah, we'll see. Eh?
Yeah, it will be interesting to see how that one plays out. We're at the Orkestra, we're definitely interested to see if there's opportunities there, especially around how to model those. Thanks for that, Jason. Couple more questions. We've got a little bit more time. So another good one just regarding network tariffs. So yeah, if any of you are existing customers of Orkestra, you probably see that we've got a pretty robust library of network tariffs for Australia. We did put in a lot of New Zealand network tariffs, I think, late last year. So they are in the library. We also know, is it the start of April when all of those network tariffs update in New Zealand? So yeah, we're sort of looking at that as being potential a time to go and update all those network tariffs we have. I guess the biggest suggestion from our end is if there's network tariffs in there that you don't see, just reach out to us and let us know, and we can start to look at integrating more of them into the library. Jake, is there anything you want to comment on the network tariff side of things?
It is possible to build them in yourself, but understandably, if you're having a hard time building the network tariffs, let us know. Again, as Tyler mentioned, if there's a network that you guys are keep coming across, obviously we'll be looking to try and build those in. At the moment, I think we have about 50 in there, and obviously as interest grows in New Zealand, we'll continue focusing on building more and continue building the library up.
Yeah, fantastic. Okay, I think that's sort of it for questions. If anyone has more questions, you might think of something later, please feel free to send them through, and we'll triage those to the team. Well, we've got one more. Here we go. For Ecotricity. Can you give us an update on what's happening on the 1st of April? I'm guessing that's just around network tariffs, right?
Yeah, network pricing. Yeah, so in New Zealand, network companies, we've got about 27 network companies here in New Zealand, and their annual schedules, price schedules, take effect 1 April. So they generally start consulting with the market or notifying the market, shall we say, late the year before. And I think they aim to have those prices finalised pre-Christmas, and then they send them out to the retailers who frantically try and get them into their systems in time for 1 April. I think there's about 23,000 price points that need to go in each year, something like that. So it's a fun time for everyone in New Zealand.
Wow, so many. And I'm sort of going back to sort of the end of last year, but from my understanding as well is that on the network tariff side of things in New Zealand, is it forecasted that there's actually going to be quite steep increases year on year for sort of the next 5 years? Am I correct to say that?
Look, I think it's, as a general theme, yes. And for example, one of the biggest network companies in New Zealand, Vector, maybe a year or so ago now, when they were casting their eye out to the future, they said, hey, look, if New Zealand or Vector Network can't leverage this thing called flexibility services, VPP, all that sort of fun stuff, then they'll need to triple the size of that network. And if they can leverage flexibility, they'll only need to double it. So that just gives you an idea of the scale, and of course, the end customers end up paying for that, right? So yes, we think it is going to increase over time.
Yeah.
Just going back to one of the points that was briefly touched on in the presentation is that the task force for energy competition kind of put forward a consulting paper essentially on the peak export incentives from the network. So we definitely support those type of decisions. We think that it's kind of like rewarding customers back for the energy they generate at particular times, and then definitely helps building the business case for batteries. That there are times in the year at a residential level, for example, where you might have the network charge being pretty much half of the total charge the customer would pay at a peak time. So if you take as a principle, and we don't know yet what that incentive might be, but it means that whatever you are importing at a peak time, you could essentially sell it at peak time, which hopefully will support more battery uptake and these type of things. So if that comes into play, and we hope it will, is probably from the 1st of April 26. So not this year, would be something for next year. considering the lead time for a lot of those commercial setups. It's probably a good time to have those conversations, get started, model those PV systems, but make them battery ready whenever they flip that switch on.
Yeah, excellent. We've had another good one come in, another good question come in here, just about, in Australia, we've seen, a lot of curtailment taking place for solar systems. So, they get their approval to install and they might say that there's zero export on that site going back to grid. Just looking at what's happening in New Zealand, like, is there any situation where that might take place as well, knowing that a lot of these tariffs are really dependent on these reverse 144s and being able to export? Are you seeing sort of any future forecasts of any sort of curtailment on these sites, or will it be completely different in New Zealand?
Happy to make some comments around that. The generation profile is quite different across both countries, and when Australia had, massive success with solar, wasn't a time that kind of batteries were readily, let's say, available or affordable, which then kind of, shaped that kind of the curve where the price in the middle of the day might go to zero or negative even. We think this will be quite different here in New Zealand, given the hydro profile we have. It's probably more of a risk for very large sites. So we would imagine this happening across, very large solar farms in the 100+ megawatts that we're talking about. We don't see this really impacting smaller systems or even commercial systems. Nevertheless, always good to have battery as an option there to cater for those situations, right? Like, so you can deploy at different times and these type of things. The uptake in New Zealand is still small, considering the total number of ICPs. So it's roughly around 2.5 to 3% of the total number of ICPs we have in the country. So we think there's still a long way to go until this becomes kind of like a network problem in a way. And what might also happen is that then you're going to have, price incentives for people to charge their EVs and these type of things, which is also way larger here, the uptake of EVs than it was in Aussie when solar kind of took off. So quite a different setup. So yeah, but there's a risk. There's always a risk, most likely for the larger sites. Jess, I don't know if you had any additions to that.
No, look, I think you've covered that pretty well, Lewis. Good job.
Excellent. Well, we might wrap it up there, but thanks so much, everybody, for joining. Huge shout out to Ecotricity. Thanks, Lewis and Jason, for joining us today. And yeah, really, really insightful and fantastic to see the opportunities in New Zealand. And we're really excited at Orkestra to continue working closely with Ecotricity and helping deploy as much solar and batteries across the country of New Zealand as possible. It's a really exciting times ahead. For all of those that have been with us today, thank you so much for joining. We will be sending out a recording of the webinar, so you'll be able to check in with that. Give us a little bit of time, maybe a day to get that one out, and also the slide deck as well. So slides, you'll be able to click on some links in there. If anyone wants to get in touch with Ecotricity, potentially as to join as an EPC partner, if anyone wants to get in touch with Orkestra, please feel free to reach out to us. Like I said, we've got a free trial period and open for anyone to join, and we can help you get set up in there. Thanks so much. We'll leave it at that. Thanks, everybody. We'll see you next time. Have a good day.
Everyone.
Take care.
Thanks, guys. Take care.